بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن سهلا إذا شئت. آمين. So Monday, alhamdulillah, we're able to go over about half of Surah al-Fajr. So just a quick review of that. So Allah Ta'ala, He begins the surah with وَالْفَجْرِ وَلَيَالٍ عَشْرٍ وَالشَّفْعِ وَالْوَتْرِ وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا يَسْرٍ. So that's four straight qasams, four straight oaths that Allah Ta'ala makes. Just as a refresher, we said that some of the purposes of an oath is that Allah Ta'ala is expressing His anger, perhaps, or that He is making these things a witness, that He is making the Fajr and time of Fajr or the Salatul Fajr, whatever the opinion may be, which we're going to get into inshallah. Making these things a witness for him on like a hujjatan ala nas. Additionally, we have it's an attention grabber, just like obviously back in the old days they didn't just like yell out certain like slang words like we may do now, just to grab people's attention. Rather, the qasam was used to grab the attention of the people. It could be to express the importance of these certain things. هل في ذلك قسم لذي حجر. And lastly, we have prelude to the rest of the surah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So I already kind of started the review, so it just started like a minute ago, right? So you didn't really miss much. Okay. No, you're good. So, or it could be, okay, so it's either the purposes of the oath, I'll just say it one more time, it's either to express anger, to make the things that Allah Ta'ala is taking an oath on as a witness against the people. It's an attention grabber. It is to express the importance of these things. And number 5 is, it is a prelude to the rest of the surah. What does this mean? That, of course, Allah Ta'ala, He's not just like saying random qasams in the beginning of the surah and He's going to talk about something else in the rest of the surah. Rather, there's a deep connection. And this is actually something where you could find a deep like symmetry of the surah if we're able to connect these beginning ayat to the rest of the surah, which inshallah we'll try to do before we wrap up today by the end of class. Okay, Fajr. Fajr literally means for something to rip through something. So like how we call it Salatul Fajr is because that's when the light rips through the darkness, and that's how we know the time begins. Additionally, the Fajr time of the day is the beginning of life. And you know, this is where like the birds start chirping and animals, like things start their day at this time. The ulama say that this is also the time that the slave is most aware and closest to Allah Ta'ala. This also alludes to life after death, as the day is after the night in our Islamic calendars. Additionally, actually, I think Maulana Yusuf mentioned this in class. He said that the previous surah, Surah Al-Ghashiyah, ends with Inna ilayna iyabahum thumma inna alayna hisabahum. And he says, Maulana Yusuf, let me just see if I have it written down. Dawn is used for after the dawn is used for after the darkness of death. There will be an awakening. What? This is third year Mustafa notes. Okay, I'm sorry, but I'm pretty. But basically, it has to do with the end of the previous surah. Talks about how Allah Taala is going to take their hisab, and then right now we're talking about these surah, the beginning of life, and how like I think I had also mentioned something similar, that you know when we go to sleep and then we wake up in the morning, we say Alhamdulillah alladhi ahyana ba'da ma amatana. We don't say Alhamdulillah alladhi ayqadhana ba'da nawmina, or ba'da nawmina, or something like that, right? So there's a deep connection between our sleep and death, and of course with resurrection and all these things. And additionally, it alludes to the coming of revelation, because revelation, as has been described before, I think it was Suratul Takwir, that Allah Ta'ala, He takes the qasam on like basically how just like how Allah Ta'ala sends rain from the sky and it brings the dead earth to life. Similarly, revelation comes down from the sky and it brings the dead hearts to life. So over here we have the Fajr being like that revelation that comes, and it illuminates the darkness away. Anyways, ayah number 2. وَلَيَالٍ عَشْرٍ. So the main opinion is that this is referring to the first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah. The second most popular opinion is that this is referring to the last 10 nights of Ramadan. But the main opinion is that this is referring to the first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah. Okay, now one thing that we see, how does this connect to the first ayah? is that just like how we said that the Fajr is the coming of revelation, then if we were to say that the Walayal Ashr is the last 10 nights of Ramadan, that is the time in which the revelation first began. Or if we were to say that this is the first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah, well, that's when Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam stood on the day of Arafah and he addressed his 100 plus thousand members of his ummah that were with him on the Hajj, right? So this is like the entire seerah summarized in the one ayah. Okay, ayah number 3 was Shafi'i wal Watr. Was Shafi'i wal Witr, as in other riwayat, is we had a multitude of opinions for this could be referring to like the days of some certain days of in the Hajj itself. The 10th is the day of Nahar, which is the Shafa', and the Watr, the Ad, is referring to the day of Arafah, which is the 9th. It could be referring to the Shafa' being the Alam, like we have the sun and the moon as pairs. We have man and woman. We have land and sea, sky and earth, and all these different pairs. And then the Watr, the one, the Ad, the singular, is of course Allah Ta'ala. There's other less likely opinions, like the Abwab al-Jannah being 8, and Jahannam having 7 darajat, 7 levels. There's also Safa and Marwa being referred to as a Shafa', and the Baytullah being referred to as the Watar. Of course, there's a lot of different things, but the main ones probably those first one or two that I had mentioned. وَلَيَالٍ or وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا يَسْرٍ. And Allah Ta'ala takes an oath by the night when it passes, when it goes. Okay. هل في ذلك قسم لذي حجر. Is this not like a sufficient proof for the people of intellect? لذي حجر بمعنى عقل. Because it prevents a person from doing silly things, as I have written down here. ألم ترى. Okay, so anything else regarding these 5 points? Let's see if Mufti Shafi adds anything. This sentence is in the form of an interrogation. It's in the form of a question to awaken man from his slumber. The subject of oaths is implied, though not stated explicitly. The verse purports to say that when man considers into the majesty of Allah Ta'ala and reflects on the greatness of objects of oaths, it would be confirmed and verified that everyone has to give account of his deeds, and reward and punishment in the hereafter is sure. In this connection, reference is made to the destruction of 3 previous. Okay. So now those are all the qasams. The first 4 ayat are all the qasams. What is the jawab al-qasam? So according to most mufassirun, it is mahzuf. That's why is Allah Ta'ala taking these first 4 oaths it's for the purpose of la yu'adhibanna kuffara yawm al-qiyamah. That Allah Ta'ala, the jawab al-qasam is that la ya'khudhanna Allah al-kuffara yawm al-qiyamah, that he's going to seize and he's going to punish the disbelievers on the day of judgment. Why? Because all these things are there to express, to give the hint to people that there is a maker, there is a creator of all this, and he is going to take you to task. So now how else do we know that is most likely the jawab al-qasam? Is because from ayah number 6 to ayah number 13, we're just going to be talking about previous nations that were destroyed and how Allah Ta'ala took them to task. So meaning, look at all these great signs that Allah Ta'ala is taking an oath on, and look at how all these nations that he's about to mention were all destroyed. Therefore, don't be like them and take a lesson from these oaths that Allah Ta'ala is taking. Okay, أَلَمْ تَرَ كَيْفَ فَعَلَ رَبُّكَ بِعَادٍ. Ayah number 6. 6-8. إِرَمَ ذَاتِ الْعِمَادِ الَّتِي لَمْ يُخْلَقْ مِثْلُهَا فِي الْبِلَادِ. So the previous surah talks about the unseen. Now let's talk about the seen, and those things that you could see, that you, O people of Quraysh, can see, and that will be used as evidence. Previous surah talks about هَلْ أَتَاكَ حَدِيثُ الْغَاشِيَةِ وُجُوهٌ يَوْمَئِذٍ خَاشِعَةٌ. It's talking about the future, right? But now Allah Ta'ala is bringing to the table all these destroyed nations who the Arab, the Quraysh, were aware of, that have already been destroyed by Allah Ta'ala, and you see you pass by their ruined towns when you go travel throughout the lands for business and whatnot. So now you have to take ibrah from that as well. Alam tara. Tara is the mukhatab here. is Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam, but his job is to recite, so everyone is hearing. So although it says Alam Tara, which is directly addressed to Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, of course, because he's reciting the verses, in reality it's everyone, right? This verse has two different purposes. The first is that it's an encouragement to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Sahaba, because although they're being oppressed, Allah Ta'ala is saying that look at how we dealt with all these bullies of the past when they bullied our Muslims. We destroyed them. Again, additionally, at the same time, it's also a warning to the Quraysh that you guys are bullying my Muslims now, and look what happened to the bullies from beforehand. You're going to meet the same fate. So Aad, the people of Aad, they were the nation in which Hud alayhi salam was sent to them. And we'll talk a little bit more about them. Irama, that al-Imad, as we said, it's either Badal or Atf Bayan. And Iram it could be like the name of a city, it could be the name of one of the forefathers, it could be one of like those, like the original members of their tribe. Okay, Irama Dhatil Imad, the possessors of Imad. So Imad is pillars. So either this means that their bodies were like pillars, like we said that their bodies were just, they were very physically gifted, or that they were, it doesn't have to be one of the other, but it could be that they were also great builders, great architects. Irama Dhatil Imad. التي لم يخلق مثلها في البلاد. None like them was created in their في البلاد, in their towns and cities that they had. وثمود الذين جابوا الصخر بالواد. And ألم ترى كيف فعل ربك بعاد. ألم ترى كيف فعل ربك بثمود. So yeah, that's معطوف over to ayah number 6. Have you not seen what Allah Ta'ala has done with the people of Thamud? الذين جابوا الصخر بالواد. The one who used to pierce through these gigantic boulders in their valleys. وفرعون, again معطوف to ayah number 6. ألم تر كيف فعل ربك بفرعون ذي الأوتاد, the possessor of pegs. أوتاد, as came in, I think I said this last time too, Surat al-Naba. والجبال أوتادا. Now, why is he called Dhil Autad? It's because either of his massive army that when they would travel, of course, they had to pitch their tents at night. So then they had to use the pegs. So then if you were to like look at it from above, from like an aerial view, you just see a bunch of massive tents, or not a massive tents, but like a large number of tents just spread throughout. And of course, they had to be pegged down. Or it could be referring to his method of torture as described in other parts of the Quran, where Allah Ta'ala says that, what's the ayah? What are the ayahs? Where it's described his method of torture is what he would cut off their limbs from opposite sides. If he cut off the right hand, he would take off the left, and then what would he do? He would basically right? He would crucify them, and then if you want to crucify someone, you want to put them up on that wooden plank, you have to drive pegs into their limbs, like through their flesh, through their bones, and all that stuff. الذين طغوا في البلاد فأكثروا فيها الفساد. Okay, so now this is important. This is one of the main things being mentioned here, is that the reason for their destruction is الذين طغوا في البلاد فأكثروا فيها الفساد. That these الذين are referring to Ad, Thamud, and Fir'aun. All three of these nations and tribes. The ones who, how does Allah Ta'ala describe them? Excuse me. He describes them as the one who are basically fitna mongers, that they just decided to transgress and basically do whatever the heck they want. Taghaw fil bilad, in their cities, in their respected nations and whatnot. فأكثروا فيها الفساد, and due to their طغيان, due to their ma'asiyah and disobedience of Allah Ta'ala, فأكثروا فيها الفساد. Much corruption was sown in between them, between all these communities and these nations. Completely became immoral and godless in a sense. فَصَبَّ عَلَيْهِمْ رَبُّكَ سَوْطَ عَذَابٍ. Sawt bima'na, it means a whip or a lash. So فَصَبَّ عَلَيْهِمْ رَبُّكَ سَوْطَ عَذَابٍ, that and Allah Ta'ala poured upon them. Sab is like where you just completely, like you take the bucket and you just completely flip it over, and a person just like gets way too much water on them at once. رَبُّكَ سَوْطَ عَذَابٍ, He brought down upon them very quickly, very swiftly, without any hesitation, the whip of punishment. There was one thing. The punishment inflicted upon them As a result of their mischief, and referred to here as a whip of torment, it signifies that just as lashes are inflicted across different parts of the body, the torment these nations received was similar to it in that they suffered different kinds of punishment. We know this from different verses of the Quran where Allah Ta'ala talks about their punishment in a bit more detail. فَكُلًّا أَخَذْنَا بِذَنْبِهِ وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ أَرْسَلْنَا عَلَيْهِ حَاصِبًا وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ أَخَذَتْهُ الصَّيْحَةُ وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ خَسَفْنَا بِهِ الْأَرْضَ وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ أَغْرَقْنَا. Where Allah Ta'ala says that فَكُلًّا أَخَذْنَا بِذَنْبِهِ, that He took to task each and every single one of these nations. This is Surah Al-Ankabut, ayah number 40. Surah Al-Ankabut, ayah number 40, where he took task, he took these different nations to task by giving them different punishments. Some of them they had like the winds that were just these non-stop terrible winds that just completely decimated them, and some of them had like Aad, فَأُهْلِكَتْ عَادٌ بِالرِّيحِ, the Aad, they were destroyed by these winds, and Thamud was destroyed by this really loud screech and scream. وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ أَخَذَتْهُ الصَّيْحَةُ, the scream. وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ خَسَفْنَا بِهِ الْأَرْضِ, قَارُونَ, he was just basically just swallowed up into the earth, right? Earth opened up and just swallowed him. وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ أَغْرَقْنَا وَفِرْعَوْنَ وَجُنُودُهُ بِالْغَرْقِ, and the people of Fir'aun and his army, they were drowned. Interestingly, we also see that the last of these three nations, these three الَّذِينَ طَغَوْا فِي الْبِلَادِ, is Fir'aun, and Allah Ta'ala says فَصَبَّ عَلَيْهِمْ, again making ishara towards how Fir'aun was drowned as well. Okay, how am I doing on time? 16, okay. Inna rabbaka labil mirsad. Okay, indeed, this is also said to be the possible jawab al-qasam. Inna rabbaka labil mirsad. But Jalalain mentions it's probably the muqaddar mahdhuf of لَيَأْخُذَنَّ where is it at? وجواب القسم محذوف أي لتعذبن يا كفار مكة. Why does he say it's most likely? Most likely because it's like so much after, where it doesn't seem like this is most likely the Jawab al-Qasam. It's most likely something that's hidden. So that's mahdhuf right after those four qasams, immediately after the oaths. Okay, inna rabbaka labil mirsad. Indeed, your Lord is waiting in ambush. فَأَمَّا الْإِنسَانُ إِذَا مَا ابْتَلَاهُ رَبُّهُ فَأَكْرَمَهُ. Oh, by the way, we're probably going to have like a shorter class today. Probably just going to finish the surah and then, well, I say short, thinking that it's just going to take like 10 minutes, but who knows, it might still take the full hour. Okay, but yeah, but inshallah, I don't think we're probably not going to start Surat al-Balad today, is my point. Okay, فأما الإنسان إذا ما ابتلاه ربه فأكرمه ونعمه فيقول ربي أكرمن وأما إذا ما ابتلاه فقدر عليه رزقه فيقول ربي أهانن. Okay, 2 points here. Okay, let me just translate it first. As for those individuals, as for those human beings, insan here is mainly referring to the kuffar, but it could really be just anyone with this attitude. That for those individuals who are tested by their Lord, and they are فَأَكْرَمَهُ وَنَعَمَهُ, and they're given wealth, and they're given فَأَكْرَمَهُ أي بالمال, and they're given all sorts of blessings. What did they say? فَيَقُولُ رَبِّي أَكْرَمَنِي. They say that my Lord has surely honored me. As for those individuals who are tested with having not a lot of sustenance, not a lot of rizq, they will say that فَيَقُولُ رَبِّي أَهَانَنِ. They say that my Lord has dishonored me. Okay, so now 2 things. The first being that, let me just mention what Mufti Shafi mentions first. He says, wealth and poverty are no signs of one's acceptance or rejection. I'll just summarize it. He had like a whole page on this. Let me just read a little bit. So first, okay, so when Allah gives abundant wealth and good health to such people, the devil puts in their head 2 false ideas. First, they succumb to their baser instincts, they become haughty and arrogant, and they think that their wealth and health is the result of their superior intellect, personal capability, efforts, and achievement. And people associate, whenever they're in like a good time, they always associate it with themselves. Whenever they're in a difficult time, they always try to blame Allah Ta'ala. Na'udhu billah. Secondly, they think that they are enjoying a favorable status with Allah Ta'ala. If they did not enjoy a favorable position with Him, they would not have been given such an abundance of wealth. So by the same token, if Allah Ta'ala curtails their sustenance, i.e. they suffer some form of poverty, they regard it as a curse from Allah Ta'ala and complain that He is humiliating or dishonoring them while they deserved honor and respect. Okay, so this is another important point to keep in mind. That people are saying that فَيَقُولُ رَبِّي أَكْرَمًا فَيَقُولُ رَبِّي أَهَانًا, being that فَيَقُولُ رَبِّي أَكْرَمًا, yes, I deserve this wealth, and I deserve this honor this whole time. And it's like the attitude is that, Allah Ta'ala wised up and made sure that He treated me correctly, which na'udhu billah. And then فَيَقُولُ رَبِّي أَهَانًا, they say that, why am I, such an honorable and amazing individual, why is my Lord dishonoring me in this way? Why is He not making, na'udhu billah, like a smarter decision or something? Okay, and additionally, man, this Shaykh Sabuni, he mentioned something absolutely amazing. He says, um, somewhere over here, where is it at? Let me just, okay. وهذا okay. فيقول ربي أهانني، فيقول غافلا عن الحكمة إن ربي أهانني بتضييقه الرزق علي. قال القرطبي. He says that, the person who is just not aware of what Allah Ta'ala's desire, Allah Ta'ala's plan, Allah Ta'ala's of the hikmah of Allah Ta'ala, he'll say that Allah Ta'ala has dishonored me by not giving me a lot of money and stuff. قال القرطبي, Imam Qurtubi, he adds, وهذه صفة الكافر الذي لا يؤمن بالبعث. This is the characteristic of a disbeliever, the one who doesn't believe in resurrection. وإنما الكرامة عنده والهوان بكثرة الحظ في الدنيا وقلته. Because nobility and disgrace, it has to do with how much worldly possession a person has, for the disbeliever. وأما المؤمن فالكرامة عنده أن يكرمه أن يكرمه الله بطاعته وتوفيقه المؤدي إلى حظ الآخرة. Whereas for the believer, nobility is when Allah Ta'ala is inspiring a person towards more good deeds, because what this is securing him more, not worldly possession, but other worldly possession, and he's getting a better share in the hereafter. وإن وسع عليه في الدنيا حمده وشكره. And if it so happens to be that the believer also gets a lot of worldly possessions as well, then this is just an opportunity for him to thank Allah Ta'ala and for him to be grateful to Allah Ta'ala. One of my favorite hadiths, if not my favorite hadith, is that عجب عن سهيل رضي الله عنه عن النبي صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم عجبا لأمر المؤمن إن أمره كله له خير وليس ذلك لأحد إلا للمؤمن إن أصابته سراء. Let me just. That's how weird and how amazing is the situation of the believer, which is this narration that I'm saying right now. عجبا لأمر المؤمن إن أمره كله له خير. That every single situation that a Muslim may be in, then that is always going to be a good situation for him. عجبا yeah. In whatever situation that a believer finds himself in, it's always going to be a position. He's always going to be in a position of good. وليس ذلك لأحد إلا للمؤمن. And if you're not believe, if a person doesn't believe in Allah Ta'ala, he can never be in this state. Not like he won't always. He's going to think that he's in good times at sometimes. He's going to think he's in bad times at other times. In أصابته سراء شكر فكان خير له. Because if he's in a good state, then he's going to thank Allah Ta'ala, and that's of course good for him, because what, he's just securing more good deeds for himself. He's just getting a better akhirah for himself. When asabatu darra, and if some misfortune or calamity does befall him, sabara fakana khayran lahu, then he is patient. He exercises patience, and of course that is good for him as well. Inna Allah ma'as sabirin. Allah Ta'ala says that He is with those who are patient. So that's Rawahu Muslim. So that's the attitude that a Muslim should have. Where was I reading from? Okay. وإنما أنكر تعالى على الإنسان فقوله أنكر تعالى على الإنسان قوله ربي أكرمني وقوله ربي أهانن. لأنه إنما قال ذلك على وجه الفخر والكبر. Because the person, in this ayah, talking about the kuffar who say that فيقول ربي أكرمن فيقول ربي أهانن, they're saying that على وجه الفخر والكبر. They're just saying that out of pure arrogance. لا على وجه الشكر. They're not saying that out of and like for the first, at least for the first example, فيقول ربي أكرمن, you could say that, hey, that guy's actually doing something right. No, the reason he's saying that my Lord is honoring me is because he's basically saying that God wised up and He made sure that He gave me the respect that I deserve. That's basically what he's saying. Na'udhu billah. كلا بل لا تكرمون اليتيم. What was the second point that I was going to say? So the first point was basically what I just mentioned now. Second point was notice, yes, I think this is it, maybe. Notice that Allah Ta'ala says, فَأَمَّا الْإِنسَانُ إِذَا مَا ابْتَلَاهُ رَبُّهُ فَأَكْرَمَهُ. That when Allah Ta'ala puts this individual through a test by granting him wealth, by granting him a bunch of sustenance and granting him biman and all these different things. And then again, the same word is used. وَأَمَّا إِذَا مَا ابْتَلَاهُ فَقَدَرَ عَلَيْهِ رِزْقَهُ. That when Allah Ta'ala says that he uses the same exact verb of ibtila. One thing I should probably mention before this was there's different types of words that Allah Ta'ala uses for test. We have imtihan. Imtihan is when you test someone but there's no pain. Like it's just like how we call our exams imtihan, right? There's bala, which is a little bit more difficult. When ibtila is when it's the most difficult. As Allah Ta'ala, He uses the same verb for Ibrahim alayhi salam, who of course he had a lot of difficult tests as well. He had being thrown in the fire, having to slaughter his son, leaving his wife and kid and stuff. What's the ayah? وَإِذْ ابْتَلَىٰ إِبْرَاهِيمَ رَبُّهُ بِكَلِمَاتٍ فَأَتَمَّهُنَّ. Third to last page of first juz, right? So that's ibtila is being used here. Now the question is that okay, it makes sense. وَأَمَّا إِذَا مَا ابْتَلَاهُ فَقَدَرَ عَلَيْهِ رِزْقَهُ. Those individuals who are tested with having not a lot of money, not a lot of wealth, and what do they say? فَيَقُولُ رَبِّي أَهَانًا. Why is the same verb used for the first ayah though? فَأَمَّا الْإِنسَانُ إِذَا مَا ابْتَلَاهُ فَأَكْرَمَهُ وَنَعَمَهُ, right? Allah Ta'ala is showing us that in both these situations, these are both a test. And this is something that we should, especially living here in the West, we have a better situation than most of the world, is that our this is also a test, and this is also meaning what? Not only is it a test, but it's also a means of getting reward. So although we are not in alhamdulillah, we're not in a situation of difficulty. Most likely, if we were in that situation, we wouldn't be able to pass it. Just like how, unlike those who are across the world living in impoverished countries and in very difficult situations, who are used to that lifestyle and stuff. If we were to just go there and we have to live our lives like that, like most likely we wouldn't do so well. But Allah Taala is saying that you individuals who are in a good state, who are blessed with all sorts of different ni'am, if you are able to pass this test, you will also gain a lot of reward as well. And then I think I had mentioned the narration of الطَّاعِمُ الشَّاكِرُ كَالصَّائِمِ الصَّابِرِ, that the individual who's not fasting, but he is being grateful to Allah Ta'ala for the food that he's eating, he is like the one who is fasting and is remaining patient. He is like the one who is fasting and is remaining patient. So now just connecting it back, well, I think I'll just mention this and then we can move on. That connecting it back to the whole the fact that money and poverty are no signs of one acceptance or rejection. He says that wealth does not indicate acceptance of a man by Allah Ta'ala, nor does poverty indicate rejection. For Allah Ta'ala gives wealth to those whom He loves and to those who He does not love. Likewise, He withholds sustenance and wealth from those who He loves and from those He does not love. So often the matter is quite contrary. Fir'aun, the Pharaoh, he claimed Godhead, he claimed to be a Lord, and yet he suffered from no headache. Meaning, again, Fir'aun, the worst of the worst, like the worst of the worst, he claimed uluhiyya, he claimed he was a god. What did Allah Ta'ala do? He didn't just like send a lightning bolt, right? Allah Ta'ala, if anything, gave him more wealth, more money, more rizq. Whereas some of the prophets, they were sliced by enemies into two pieces with a saw. The Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam is reported to have said that the poor refugees will enter paradise 40 years before the wealthy muhajirs, the immigrants. Imam Muslim narration of Muslim. In another narration, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam is reported to have said that whomever Allah loves, He keeps him away from the worldly luxuries, as people keep their sickly patients from water. So meaning that it is actually a sign of Allah Ta'ala's love that a person may be deprived of the wealth. Why? So that they don't get engaged, they don't get caught up in turning away from, like, basically they don't get caught up in hubb dunya. Okay. Any questions? I've been talking a lot, so okay, so let's get okay, next portion is كلا بل لا تكرمون اليتيم ولا تحاضون على طعام المسكين وتأكلون التراث أكلا لما وتحبون المال حبا جما. Okay, these four ayat are talking about spending on the orphan and the like. Starting from ayah number 17. Ayah number 17. Okay. No, kalla. This is to do nafi of what of the previous attitude that the kuffar have in the two previous ayat that we just spent a few minutes going over. That is not the case. It's not the case that, oh, I have money, therefore my Lord is honoring me. I don't have money, therefore my Lord is dishonoring me. Kalla. Nope. That's not the situation at all. Balla tukrimun al-yatim. Rather, you do not honor the orphan. You do not honor the orphan. ولا تحاضون على طعام المسكين, nor do you urge one another to feed the poor. The poor. Let's stick to that. وتأكلون التراث أكل اللمة. Ayah number 19. And moreover, you devour the inheritance, التراث, بمعنى الميراث, in the meaning of inheritance. You eat the inheritance um, with a devouring greed. Sheikh Sabuni, he says that lamma, oh, this is not even the right book. That's something that we need to discuss. Inshallah, will come up later in the surah. لما بمعنى شديدا وأصله الجمع ومنه قولهم لما الله شعثه. Not sure what that means exactly, but basically it means shadida. It means akla lamma, you just completely destroy it. وَتَأْكُلُونَ التُّرَاث, you eat the inheritance of the yatim, and you don't leave anything left behind for him. Okay, meaning that when it's time, like for example, if there's a yatim that if there's an orphan whose parents died and then he is moved into the care of another guardian or something, that guardian will use that leftover money of the parents that's supposed to be for the child, and he'll take it for himself. He'll spend it on himself, his own family, and basically just not give it to that child once he reaches of age. وَتُحِبُّونَ الْمَالَ حُبًّا جَمًّا. And you have تحبون المال حبا جما. جما بمعنى كثيرا عظيما كبيرا. A huge, basically almost shadidan again. And you have a huge love of wealth. Now the question I had asked was, what does this have anything to do with what we have been reading this entire time? Any ideas? We talked about a couple of oaths. We talked about Fir'aun, Ad, Thamud. We talked about Allah Ta'ala is punishing them. And then we talked about, the whole money and poverty is not the sign of one's acceptance. Then we're talking about an orphan. Like ayahs numbers 17 to 20. Like what do they have to do with the rest of the surah? Any ideas? No? I tried looking it up in Nazm al-Durar. Anyone, you guys want to remind me what that tafsir is about? Connections between various parts of the Quran. Yeah. So he'll give the connection. Great job. By Alama Biqai. He'll give the connections between like why is this portion mentioned right after that portion, those things. I don't. He didn't really give a answer, or I don't. I didn't understand what he was saying. Let me. Okay. I didn't really get what he was saying. So, but over here he says, "Laysa al-ikram kalla bal la tukrimun al-yatim." Rather, you do not honor the orphan. Rather, you do not honor the orphan. ليس الإكرام بالغنى. And then Sheikh Sabuni says that honor is not by having wealth. والإهانة بالفقر كما تظنون. والإهانة بالفقر كما تظنون. Nor is dishonor nor is dishonor being impoverished as you believe. والإكرام والإهانة بطاعة الله ومعصيته ولكنكم لا تعلمون. Rather, nobility and dishonor is in obedience to Allah Ta'ala. That's nobility. And of course, the ma'siyah, or disobeying Allah Ta'ala, is true dishonor. وَلَكِنَّكُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Rather, but you guys don't understand the reality. Does that make sense? I feel like there's just something else that I get what he's saying here, and I get basically he's saying that you guys think that honor comes from having wealth. You guys think that dishonor comes from being poor. No, rather true honor is in obedience, and dishonor is in disobedience of Allah Taala. ولكنكم لا تعلمون. I just think that there's like maybe one more layer we can go underneath to tie it together with the rest, but I'm just not seeing that right now. Which is basically, I mean, I get this makes sense. I'm not saying this doesn't make sense. I just feel like there's one maybe like another step we could take it to kind of tie it a little bit more together with the rest of the surah. So that's something I'm gonna have to think about a little bit more, or I'm just tweaking. Okay, ولا تحاضون على طعام المسكين ولا يحض بعضكم بعضا ولا يحث على طعام المحتاج وعون المسكين. That you guys don't encourage you not only okay. So what was I gonna say? كلا بل تحب. Oh shoot! I hope the recording didn't end. Okay, yes, great. Okay, so you don't honor the yatim. Mufti Shafi he talks about these 4 or 5 ayat in a bit more detail, and he says, let me just read them quickly. First, as I mentioned in this verse, they do not honor and treat the orphans kindly. The basic objective of this verse is that they deprive them of their rights and they do not spend on them what is due to them. But the expression used is that they do not honor them, probably to indicate that the requirement for Allah's gratitude and also of a humanitarian sense is not only that the orphans are given their dues by spending wealth on them, but it's also necessary to honor them and treat them kindly. So obviously, so now what is the next 2 ayahs? They talk about how the people would not care for them and they would usurp their money that wasn't even theirs. They would take the orphans' money. So Allah Ta'ala is saying not only should you be not doing that, but you should be going a level above and beyond and you should be making sure that you treat them as equals, treat them as humans at least. Right? So you guys aren't not only are you guys dishonoring them, I mean, not only are you guys not treating them as human beings, but on top of that, you're stealing their wealth as well. So the bigger crime is that you should be honoring the yatim, honoring the orphans. وَلَا تَحَاضُّونَ عَلَى طَعَامِ الْمِسْكِينِ. The second evil trait is that it is the obligation of the affluent to spend on the poor and indigent from their own wealth. So there is, of course, that the rich should be taking the initiative and leading, being like the spearheads of of community change and those things. It doesn't sound, I'm not trying to make it sound like some Marxist ideology right now or something, but yeah, but this is something that, in terms of our ethics, yes, the rich should be using their wealth to provide for the less fortunate. The third quality, the third evil trait of the unbelievers, the disbelievers in the verse signifies that they devour inheritance with a ferocious appetite, however they can get it, whether it be lawful or unlawful means. They gather them all together to make a sweeping gulp. When someone passes away, they take their own shares together with the shares of others, regardless of whether the shares belong to them, to the orphans, to widows, or to people who are absent. As a matter of principle, it is not permitted to mix up lawful and forbidden wealth in any transaction. Here, however, inheritance has been particularly mentioned because people have a greedy eye on it and are pursuing it. And pursuing it are a proof of man's greed and ferociousness towards wealth. He stares at it like a beast of prey, waiting for the person to die and looking for the opportunity to distribute the estate. But an honorable man of principle and a noble person would not look at the wealth of the deceased with greedy eyes. Okay, and the fourth quality, وَتُحِبُّونَ الْمَالَ حُبًّا جَمًّا, which is pretty much like really encapsulates all of the previous sifat and qualities that are mentioned, is that you just have a insatiable love for wealth. You have an insatiable love for wealth. I forgot who said this. I remember hearing this like way back, probably like in first year and maybe even before I had started my alim course and stuff. But it said that there's two people. It might be like, I don't know who said this, but there's two people who are never satisfied. It is the entrepreneur, the businessman who's always chasing after money, and the second is the talibul ilm, who's always chasing after ilm. Allah Ta'ala make us from those. Okay. The word excessive, I don't know why that just came to mind, I don't know. The word excessive indicates that the love of wealth in itself, in a sober sense, is a natural instinct of man. That has not been condemned here. What is denounced is the excessive or insatiable love of wealth. After describing the evil traits of the unbelievers, the passage reverses the main theme that was established in the earlier part of the surah with 5 oaths, that is, the punishment of the hereafter. In this connection, it first mentions the process of the end of the world and subsequently the establishment of the day of resurrection. What? In this connection. Okay, so now what are we going to be talking about? Let me just see if I could. We're going to be talking about كلا إذا دكت الأرض دكا دكا. We're going to be talking about the Day of Judgment. He says here, after describing the evil traits of the disbelievers, the passage reverts to the main theme that was emphasized in the earlier part of the surah with the five oaths. That is the punishment of the hereafter. Okay. In connection, it first mentions the process of the end of the world. Okay, never mind. I must have misread. Okay, so now we're going to be going back to like in the beginning of the surah, the mahzuf, the hidden jawab al-qasam was that Allah Ta'ala is going to take to task the kuffar. Okay, now we're going to be talking more in detail about that. Again, my question remains as to how does this whole yatim stuff tie into the rest of the surah. But I guess I'll have to figure that out at a later time. كلا إذا دكت الأرض دكا دكا. كلا إذا دكت الأرض دكا دكا. كلا للردع أي وارتدعوا أي الغافلون وانزجروا عن ذلك فأمامكم أهوال عظيمة في ذلك اليوم العصيب وذلك حين تزلزل الأرض وتحرك تحريكا متتابعا قال جلال إذا زلزلت حتى ينهدم كل بناء عليها وينعدم. What is the ردع for? Sorry, I'm making you guys wait. What is the kalla for? This is honestly, when I'm making mutala, this is probably one of the trickiest thing that come. This word right here, whenever it came up a lot in the past couple of surahs. This is probably the trickiest thing for me to understand. The kalla. Where is it at? Because like, وتحبون المال حبا جما كلا إذا دكت الأرض دكا دكا. We're like, what is this kalla for? Like, what is it negating? That's what's been every time this comes up, it just takes me like a while to figure out like, what exactly is like some of them are a bit more obvious, like the whole kalla in the previously in ayah number 17 talking about how no, that's not what honor and dishonor really is. Rather, honor and dishonor is in obedience and disobedience to Allah Ta'ala. That's easy, but this like what is this kalla here for? Which is sorry, I don't mean to just like rant to you guys. Kalla let's just skip that for now. But basically, it's for rada. It's to show that it's to I want to translate it. It's for rada, like to show that the previous claim is not how it seems. Anyways, إذا دكت الأرض دكا دكا, when the earth is completely crushed to pieces, when the earth will be crushed thoroughly to be turned into bits, دكا دكا for ta'keed, for mubalagha, to show that it's not going to be like most of it. Rather, every single inch of this entire earth will be دكت الأرض دكا دكا. It's just going to be torn to bits. So this refers to the earthquakes that will crush and ground the mountains to dust. This world will thus be dissolved. This will be the first stage of resurrection. When this stage of resurrection ends, the second stage of resurrection will begin. Okay, this is important. This is probably one of the main things that we're going to talk about today. وَجَاءَ رَبُّكَ وَالْمَلَكُ صَفًّا صَفًّا. Literally, if we translate this, what are we going to say? When your Lord will come, وَجَاءَ رَبُّكَ وَالْمَلَكُ, and the angels, صَفًّا صَفًّا, row after row. So now, this is a very important, very, very important topic to discuss. Can Allah Ta'ala come and go? Yes or no? Does he, what does coming and going necessitate? Does Allah Ta'ala have a body in which he can move from one place to another? Is that the case? No, right? So now, what do we do here? وَجَاءَ رَبُّكَ. Allah Ta'ala is saying, what is Allah Ta'ala like? Did he misspeak here? Na'udhu billah, that he said, وَجَاءَ رَبُّكَ. Okay, so now, there's two things that we could do, and this is what Laqani and Bayjuri talk about here in this what I'm about to read right now. So this is حاشية البيجوري على جوهرة التوحيد تسمى تحفة المريد. This is the hashia, like the commentary of Sheikh Bayjuri on Laqani's Jawharat al-Tawheed. It's a nazam, it's a poem, like I think 144 lines, I believe, of basically aqidah, of Ash'ari aqidah. 144 lines. And he mentions some, I would say it's like an intermediate text, and he mentions some differences between Ash'ari and Maturidis, but then he also mentions like ikhtilaf between like the Mu'tazilas and all these the other possibly popular opinions when it comes to each mas'ala. So what does he say here? وَكُلُّ نَصٍ أَوْهَمَ التَّشْبِيهَ أَوِّلْهُ أَوْ فَوِّدْ وَرُمْ تَنْزِيهَ. Okay? Every single nas, every single ayah, every single hadith that gives the impression of Allah Ta'ala being like the creation. Like in this one right here. جَاءَ رَبُّكَ. Okay? أَوِّلْهُ أَوْ فَوِّدْ وَرُمْ تَنْزِيهَ. Do أَوِّلْهُ, do ta'wil, do a proper interpretation, or do tafweed. Have you guys heard of these terms before? Ta'wil and tafweed? Okay? وَرُمْ تَنْزِيهَا. And when you explain these verses, or when you explain whatever the verse or the hadith may be, make sure that you are giving an explanation which does not give the impression of Allah Ta'ala being like the creation, pretty much. Okay? Now, there's two things that we could do. Ta'wil and tafweed. Tafweed, let me just explain this one. He says, I think he actually defines it right here. Actually, فوض هو صرف اللفظ عن ظاهره. Okay, it doesn't really say much. Tafweed is basically where this was the attitude of the Salaf, that they would say that Allah Ta'ala says وَجَاءَ رَبُّكَ. Okay, so obviously that doesn't mean that he has a body and now he's walking and he's just strolling through and he's like pulling up with his angels or something like that. No. Okay, but Allah Ta'ala said it, and it can't mean certain things, but we're not going to interpret it. We're just going to leave it how it is, and we're not going to touch it. All we know is that we believe in it. Okay, does that make sense? Allah Ta'ala said it, we believe in it. There's no need for us to go into the details. Okay, that's basically what tafweed is. Okay, on a very superficial level. Ta'wil, however, is where you give like an interpretation and an explanation as to what it could be referring to. So, Tafsir Jalalain mentions that وَجَاءَ رَبُّكَ أي أَمْرُهُ. وَجَاءَ أَمْرُ رَبِّكَ. When the قُدْرَتُهُ وَسُلْطَانُهُ, when the power and the ilm and the authority of your Lord comes on the Day of Judgment to decide between who's going to Jannah, who's going to Jahannam. That's ta'wil, where you're giving an interpretation of what ta'wil what did you say? حمله على خلاف ظاهره مع بيان المعنى المراد. So although Allah Ta'ala is saying very explicitly وَجَاءَ رَبُّكَ, that He is, when your Lord comes, what are we doing? We're moving away from the apparent meaning, because it's impossible. How is Allah Ta'ala doesn't have a body to come with, right? We're moving away from the apparent meaning, and we're giving a very natural and easily understandable interpretation of what exactly does وَجَاءَ رَبُّكَ mean. Interestingly, Laqani, he actually brings awilhu aw fawil. He brings awilhu. He brings the ta'wil of Amr first before he says fawilhu, which Bayjuri mentions. This is the so now the attitude of the Salaf was that they would do tafwil, where they would just like kind of leave it up. They'd be like, Allah Ta'ala said it, we believe in it, no need to go into details. Now, ta'wil, the reason that ta'wil is better, as he says, وَطَرِيقَةُ الْخَلَفْ أَعْلَمُ وَأَحْكَمُ, that the doing ta'wil, which is the habit of the mutaakhirun, of the later scholars, this is actually better. لما فيها من مزيد الإيضاح والرد على الخصوم وهي الأرجح, because it gives more details, it explains it more, and it is a rad al khusum. It is a refutation of all those, like, the firaq batila, or like the non-Muslims, of all it provides us with a system of being able to explain our theology against other religions. Make sense? So now I think this is something I definitely like. I have a list of things that like I just really, really want to like study more. One of them is this whole, from my understanding or from like things I've heard, is that like the Salafi Aqidah, or like the Salafi as we know them today, right? That, or like what exactly is the Athari creed? What exactly are the we say the Ash'ariya, Maturidiya, what exactly is the Hanbali school of Aqidah, and those things, is that it seems like the false notion is that to do ta'wil is incorrect, and we can only do tafwil. That's what some of these people claim, which of course this is khilaf al-jamhur, this is khilaf of the majority, this is like going against like what so many scholars after the Salaf have been doing, and they'll try to argue that because the Salaf didn't do it, we shouldn't be doing it either, which is a very weak argument, right? Because that's that's like calling it a bid'ah, but of course, it's all of our mutakallimun, all of our scholars of theology, the ones who, are engaged with kufr and bid'ah and all these sorts of things. They're the ones that are doing it, and you think that they're involved in the bid'ah. Doesn't really make sense. So basically, this is the practice of our ulama. This is the practice of our ulama for centuries that have passed. So it's of course it's not following being like Maturidi Ash'ari is not like a bid'ah or anything, and I'm sure you guys probably talked about this as well in your with Mufti Pasha. Yeah. Anyway, so that's basically tafweed and ta'wil. Any questions on like what exactly tafweed and ta'wil is at least? Make sense? Inshallah. Yeah. So I'll try to look more into the like what is the problem that certain groups have with the idea of doing ta'wil, but because he's saying it very very clear here is that وطريقة الخلف أعلم وأحكم. The the method and the manhaj of the latter day scholars is أعلم وأحكم. It's just better because it gives more explanation and like I said, it provides our theology with the system of being able to refute other theologies and other like religions and people, all that stuff. وهي الأرجح. He does also say, okay, he does say that this is the preferred method of going about certain nusus that make certain texts that may give the impression of the shabih of Allah Ta'ala with the creation, that you should do ta'wil. But then he says, وَإِذَلِكَ قَدَّمَهَا الْمُصَنِّفِ. That's why the Musannif actually brings doing ta'wil is better. He brings it first in the nazam. وَطَرِيقَةُ السَّلَفِ أَسْلَمُ. Whereas the method of the salaf is safer. لما فيها من السلامة من تعيين معنى قد يكون غير مراد له تعالى. Because we're literally just leaving it up, saying that we believe in it. There's no need to go into detail, which is of course like a better thing to do. Okay, so but my point is that they're both fine. A person shouldn't think that doing ta'wil is incorrect, as is the claim by some groups nowadays. Anyways, وجاء ربك والملك صفا صفا وجيء يومئذ بجهنم يومئذ يتذكر الإنسان وأنى له الذكرى. And Jahannam on that day will be brought forward, and it will be the day when man will realize the truth. But from where will he take advantage of such realization? On that day, Jahannam will be brought forward. وَجِيَ يَوْمَئِذٍ بِجَهَنَّمَ يَوْمَئِذٍ يَتَذَكَّرُ الْإِنسَانُ وَأَنَّى لَهُ الذِّكْرَى. That day, man will truly remember, and where is that remembrance gonna how is that gonna benefit it at all? يومئذ يتذكر الإنسان وأنى له الذكرى يقول يا ليتني قدمت لحياتي. And he will say, oh, like woe to me, would that I had sent some good deeds ahead for my life. يقول يا ليتني قدمت لحياتي. Like woe to me had I not sent any good deeds forward for لحياتي, which is interesting because how people nowadays they say that if a person's like a talibul ilm, that they're in madrasa, and that what do they say? They'd be like you're wasting your life, right? Or like you need to make sure that you're set, that in the future you're set for your life. Well, what is this kafir, this disbeliever? He's saying that قدمت لحياتي. He's describing his afterlife as a true life. Understand my point? That the disbeliever, he's saying قدمت لحياتي, yani he understands that the life of the hereafter is a true life. That's why he's lamenting. Whereas we have the attitude of I got to make sure that I'm set in this life, and the next life it's on the back burner. يا أيتها النفس المطمئنة ارجعي إلى ربك راضية مرضية فادخلي في عبادي وادخلي جنتي. يا أيها okay, let me Jalalain, he does mention a quite a did I miss? Oh, I missed two ayahs, sorry. يقول يا ليتني قدمت لحياتي فيومئذ لا يعذب عذابه أحد ولا يوثق وثاقه أحد. On that day which there shall be no torment like Allah Ta'ala's torment, ولا يوثق وثاقه أحد, nor shall none shall be binded and he shall bind as Allah Ta'ala shall bind those individuals. Okay, so just emphasizing and doing ta'keed of the fact that this is the day that that Allah Ta'ala is just going to be able to do whatever He wants with His servants. I just want to try to wrap this up real quick. يا أيتها النفس المطمئنة ارجعي إلى ربك راضية مرضية فادخلي في عبادي وادخلي جنتي. Now there's a sort of iltifat that happens here, that Allah Ta'ala is now directly addressing the النفس المطمئنة. O contented soul, يا أيتها النفس المطمئنة ارجعي إلى ربك راضية مرضية. Return back to your Lord in a state of being pleased and pleased with. Are you guys familiar with the three stages of the nafs? Nafsul ammara bisu, that's the lowest one. Nafsul mutma'inna is the highest one, and then I think we're missing the middle one. What's the middle one? Nafsul lawama. Nafsul lawama, ji. Great. Okay, so okay, ya nafsul mutma'inna irji'i ila rabbik ruju'. Like if you're going to a place for the first time, and then you're gonna, would you call that ruju'? Would you call that returning? No, right? That's because if you're going to some place for the first time, what is Allah Ta'ala saying here? He's saying return back to Him. So this is showing that the believing soul, it's his original location is in Jannah, in the proximity, quote unquote, with Allah Ta'ala, right? So there's a beautiful irji'i ila rabbik. Allah Ta'ala is basically saying just come back to Him. radiyatan mardiyah fadkhuli fi ibadi, فادخلي في جملة عبادي, with the rest of my servants الصالحين, وادخلي جنتي معهم, as Jalalain says here. May Allah Ta'ala make us from these النفس المطمئنة, who it's said to, who this is said to. There's one ishkal here, is that in some narrations it seems that this is said to a person when they're dying. Like, you know how we said وَالنَّازِعَاتِ غَرْقًا وَالنَّاشِطَاتِ نَشْطًا, when the angels come and they take the slave of the believer with suhula, that they untie that knot very easily of his soul. So they say that this is said, there's a narration that gives the impression that this is said to the believer when his soul is being removed from his body. Ibn Kathir, he says that it's possible that it's just said twice. It could be said at that time, it could also be said here. Another interesting narration is that يوجيء يومئذ بجهنم يومئذ يتذكر الإنسان وأنى له الذكرى, says تقاد ب70 ألف زمام كل زمام بأيدي 70 ألف ملك. Sorry, لها زفير والتغيظ. That Jahannam is going to have 70,000 chains when it's brought forth. وَجِيءَ يَوْمَئِذٍ بِجَهَنَّمْ. Like, for example, another ayah that we did, وَبُرِّزَتِ الْجَحِيمُ لِمَنْ يَرَى, that Jahannam will be brought forth with 70,000 chains, and each chain will have 70,000 angels holding it and like keeping it at bay. Okay? 70,000 times 70,000. I'm not sure how much that is. Someone could do the math. Okay. Anything else I'm missing? وَأَنَّ لَهُ الذِّكْرَى وَكَيْفَ لَهُ الذِّكْرَى. Anna can have multiple meanings. It could be Anna, it could be Kaif, it could be Ain, like Aina, and there's also another one that I will check. But over here it means Kaifa. And I believe that is it. Yep. Okay. Any questions? Sorry, I went overtime. Oh. Okay, no questions? Alright, Jazakumullah khairan, guys. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Questions, right? Oh yeah, go ahead. Would you share the hadith that you were referring to about the position, like whatever position a believer finds himself in, he is content with the. Yeah. Right, you earlier, and I forgot to ask you that. This is okay. Well, over here it says number 27 of Riyadh al-Salihin. Do you have Riyadh al-Salihin, a copy? Okay, so number 27 of Riyadh al-Salihin, he says, but then that's a secondary source, right? The actual primary source is Sahih Muslim, where it's 2,999. Yeah, that's one of my favorites. I think it's also in the Ahadith al-Qisar, that one by the son of Sheikh Muhammad Awama. You know what I'm talking about? Remember? That's the second year one. Oh, really? Oh, yeah. You guys gonna do that. We were memorizing last year, yeah. Yeah, we were memorizing this. Yeah, okay, never mind. If you don't, yeah. So probably 17 around. Is narrated by Suhaib. His Abu Yahya Suhaib bin Sinan is the full name. So either you see Suhaib or Abu Yahya Suhaib bin Sinan. Radiyallahu anhu. Inshallah. Alright, sorry to hold you up. Assalamu alaikum.